Hey, I'm John Cannell, and today on Preppy Kitchen, we're making some easy and delicious pumpkin whoopie pies. So let's get started. First off, set that oven to 350, and then we're gonna be adding 3 cups or 360 grams of all-purpose flour into a large bowl. And I have a sifter over this because I'm using some spices that can clump up. 360 grams. To puff our whoopie pies up, we need 1 teaspoon of baking soda and 1 teaspoon of baking powder. We're also gonna add some salt for contrast, and I wanna warn you, I'm using a kosher sea salt, which is very mild and has like a large grain. If you're using a table salt, I would use half of that, especially if it's iodized. It's a very, very sharp, salty flavor. So that's 1 teaspoon of that, or half a teaspoon if you're using one of those finer salts. Now we need to grab some spices. This delicious pumpkin whoopie pie is full of your favorite fall flavors, so we need the cinnamon, the cloves, and of course the ginger. I'm using 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon. If you wanted to go up to 2 teaspoons, you could. If you want to have allspice, a little cardamom, some nutmeg, sprinkle those in. I would go for 1/4 teaspoon of each. 2 teaspoons of ground ginger. This gives you a nice bite and really wakes the flavor up. And in case you were wondering, ginger is the clumpy spice. 1/4 teaspoon of cloves, not heaping, really just 1/4 teaspoon. We're gonna sift this up. Sifting is gonna help it mix up, it's gonna aerate the flour a bit, but mostly you're catching these giant lumps, like if you look in here, so many lumps. Our scale is done, and we're gonna, whisk those dry ingredients together. Get them nice and combined. Set that aside, and now in a separate bowl, we'll get all the wet ingredients together. This cake is so easy, but it's moist, full of flavor, and just delicious. I actually have to say hello to my scale again because I'm measuring the brown sugar out by grams. 2 cups, and yes, I keep marshmallows in my brown sugar canister so it stays nice and soft. A little tip for you. Just sick of packing my brown sugar in a measuring cup, and it's full of clumps because you made clumps. So if you use a scale, you don't have to worry about that. The brown sugar adds a ton of moisture and flavor, but it also has acid which reacts with the baking soda. 1 15-ounce can of pumpkin puree. This is the magic stuff, and I have to tell you, towards the end of summer, I was waiting for fall and pumpkin everything. I was even making pumpkin pancakes throughout the winter into the spring. So delicious. 2 large eggs, no shells. I also need 2/3 of a cup of vegetable oil. That's 160 mils. There we go. I'm gonna break up all the brown sugar and give this a nice whisk. And don't think that I forgot the 1 tablespoon or 15 mils of vanilla. This, with the spices and the pumpkin, is pure heaven. Even better when you made the vanilla yourself. That recipe's on the channel. Whisk this up until it's nice and smooth. Because I didn't pack the brown sugar, no lumps of brown sugar. What a nice change. This is nice and smooth, beautiful, one might say. Time to pour the wet into the dry, and by the way, the smell of this is wild. It's so delicious. And also, don't be tempted to lick this. No, no, no. Now we're gonna stir this together really gently. The secret to a beautiful, moist, melt-in-your-mouth whoopie pie is not overmixing the batter. So just stir it together with your spatula until the streaks just disappear. So there's a bit of a debate going on, and I want your opinion. When it comes to fall treats, are you pumpkin or apple? I feel like we shouldn't have to choose, but if I did, I might be team pumpkin, just because I can enjoy apple all year round, but I feel pumpkin's a bit more seasonal. You let me know in the comments. Okay, I'm almost there. I'm just finding a couple hidden pockets of flour towards the bottom, but really I'm so happy that I'm using a spatula and not just beating this with an electric mixer, because when we overmix our flour, we're activating the proteins in there, specifically gluten, and it gives us a gummier, stretchier texture that's not melt in your mouth. That's not melt in your mouth amazing. This looks great. Look how soft and beautiful this batter is. It's just holding together, which means it'll bake up and be perfect. Grab a small ice cream scoop. You want about 2 tablespoons of batter per scoop. And we're just gonna transfer these over onto a lined baking sheet. It could be parchment or silicone. And in a pinch, you could use 2 spoons and just spoon the batter out. They just won't be as nicely uniformly round. Give at least an inch of space in between. I like to give like 1.5 to 2 because they will puff up and spread. There's actually a little bit of debate on whoopie pies. So most people say that they're from the Pennsylvania Amish. And by the way, if I should make Amish bread for the channel or Amish friendship bread, you let me know. It was one of my high school treats because we would all pass around the starter. I was a baking nerd though, so I don't know about you. However, there was extra cake batter, a little bit of extra cake frosting, and supposedly the Amish housewives would use that to make these delicious little whoopie pies. They're called whoopie pies because the men would see them in their lunchbox and say, whoopee! The other story is that they come from this restaurant in Maine from the 20s. Unfortunately, or conveniently, all their records burnt along with the restaurant at some point, so there's no proof. But those are the 2 stories, and whoopie pies, I will say, are very common in Maine. I feel like they should be common all over because they're delicious. It's like a delicious cake sandwich that you can eat, and that they're not more popular is a shame. We're gonna bake these up for 12 to 15 minutes at 350, but if you want your whoopie pies to look really smooth and perfect, that's fine, I got you. Just get your wet fingertips, wet and clean, and tamp the edges down so that there's like no like little ridges hanging around. I don't mind seeing the ridges, but if you want them to be nice and smooth, you're just gonna use your wet fingertips like you were making an eclair almost to smooth things out. Bake your whoopie pies 1 tray at a time, 12 to 15 minutes. They're done when a skewer comes out clean from the middle. Do not overbake them, that'll make them dry. While our cakes are baking, we're gonna make a delicious cream cheese frosting. So into the bowl of your mixer, I want 1/2 cup of room temperature butter, 113 grams, and 4 ounces or 113 grams of softened cream cheese. This went into the microwave for like 30 seconds at half power just to soften it up. We're gonna cream this together so it's nice and smooth. I'm also adding in 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. In you go. All right, once that's all mixed up, you're gonna scrape the bowl down. If you make this with a stand mixer, scrape. If you're making it with a hand mixer, you can kind of just like rake the bottom of the bowl and it's not a big deal. Alrighty, now it's time for 3 cups of powdered sugar. This is gonna be the perfect complement to the cake. It's so good together. If you wanted, you could add a few spices in here, but I love the contrast of like a clean vanilla cream cheese frosting with all the pumpkin and spices in the cake. For like an extra delicious fall note, if you wanted more depth of flavor, you could brown the butter. So use that same amount of butter, but just brown it so it's nice and caramel in color, and you'll have like a beautiful nutty depth of flavor. Brown butter is something that I keep around the house when it's fall because it's good in savory and sweet dishes, and yes, I even talk about it in my cookbook. It is delicious. Get your copy today. Okay. Once that sugar's incorporated, scrape the bowl down. And now we're gonna mix on medium speed until it's light and fluffy, 30 seconds to 90. Just a little mixing later, and I want you to see the texture. This is heavenly. It's like a cloud of whipped cream cheese and sugar, and it's delicious. Pop this into a piping bag, and we're ready to assemble. You could just spoon this in, but it's not gonna look very neat. I love using a piping bag here. And for all the Virgo feelings, use a 1A piping tip, a large round. This is a casual, easy dessert, but they look so cute with just a little bit more attention to detail. Speaking of attention to detail, even though I said the right amounts in the video, I actually put in the wrong amount of sugar, and I want to show you because this is something that happens when people try and reduce sugar in a recipe. It can work, but it's different. So here is my beautiful little cake top. It's like perfectly domed, it's spread out nicely, and it's like softer than a cloud. If you added in half the sugar, which I did by accident, I had to remake this, but it comes out like this. It's basically like a little scoop of pumpkin bread. It's delicious still, but it's really more on like the bread side, like slightly sweet. And the main difference is A little bit left soft. Pumpkin is magic, so it's still pretty soft. But you can see the spread. It didn't spread out into that nice whoopie pie shape. So you're gonna taste the difference and see the difference, and oftentimes you'll feel the difference. Sugar doesn't just make things sweet, it softens the texture as well. So if you have the sugar in this recipe, you'll have pumpkin bread bites. Just made that up. The kids and I had them for afternoon snack and they were delicious. All right, now get that piping bag out and we're gonna pipe just a nice, beautiful layer of frosting. You can leave some space around the edge because when you press them together, the filling will spread out. If you wanted to make these in advance, these guys will keep in the fridge, just bring them back to room temperature, but I would assemble them before serving because the frosting will really soften the cake up and they might get a bit mushy over time. Look at this. This is a wonder. It's so soft and beautiful. All I can say is, whoopee! Oh my gosh. Pumpkin spice everything. So good. This melts in your mouth. It is like a pumpkin cloud come down to earth. You've got to try this recipe. And if you like this video, check out my pumpkin playlist.